everyone goes to their factory every day. It's like, where do you spend your time, energy, and talents every day, and what are you producing? And for anyone, it's like a good exercise to think like, hold on, what am I producing in my factory every day? What's the output? Once you've had an exit, or once you've been able to establish some level of finances, I think that you need to retool that factory and shift it. And the output shouldn't just be money, but the focus and the output should be good. Money should now become an input with time, talents, and energy to say, okay, what can we produce? Found your next mountain to climb, you found your new purpose, and you know what you're going to do, whether it's a new company or a new identity. But it's honeymoon, loss, experimentation, and reinvention.
There's a difference between a dream chaser and a dream catcher. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dream Catchers podcast. I am your host, Jerome, and I will tell you that you're in for a treat today. It's not every day that we get to talk to a founder, although who has exited. Although we talk to, it seems to be a lot of them. This one is going to be really interesting for you guys. We've got Alex Bean in with us today. He's got a new book out that's helping people figure out what to do on the backside of their exit. And I wanted to bring him in because he didn't write this from theory. He didn't write this from a book, but or something he read in a book. He's writing this from his personal experience and from the experiences that he's gathered as he's gone on this journey. So, Alex, I love to open the show by asking a simple question. So you had an exit.
Yeah. We built a company 2016, sold Divvy in 2021, and yeah, it was quite a ride.
So it's 5 years isn't a long time
Yeah.
from a lot of people's perspective. Uh, but I suspect you probably felt like it was a long time, but I might be wrong about that.
Yeah, there was like times I look back on it and now I'm like, oh, maybe it wasn't as long as I remember, but definitely, I mean, every single month felt like a year, and just because the speed of which you're running, it's not a walk, right? It's like we're sprinting a marathon. So no, it was great. Looking back though, I recognize it wasn't as long of a journey as many startups. We were fortunate in that respect, but it still took a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about the company. Did you start as a kid and just go into entrepreneurship straight from the beginning, or did you have a job and then like moved into being chief everything officer? Like, what was your journey to get into your exit?
Yeah, it's so I grew up in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in Redmond actually, where Microsoft comes from. And so I grew up before Microsoft existed, and we watched our little cow town, become huge with Microsoft, and Costco was the city over. And so we saw a lot of growth. And my great grandpa, my grandpa, my dad, my older brothers, they were all entrepreneurs. So it was always in my mind, like definitely was something I wanted to do. But went to school, graduated, ended up taking a handful of different jobs that taught me a lot of different things. So I think it wasn't until, 10 years after school that I really said, okay, I'm ready to go on my own. But I had a lot of other kind of jobs on the revenue side, and took those lessons to get into my own company.
Whoa. Okay, so your family, so you come from a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Did any of them exit?
Yeah.
And so you were aware of exiting and the liquidity event that typically comes with an exit for people who are fortunate enough to sell their business. I, I don't think most people have that exposure. Do you think that was helpful as you were building? Like, I guess, did you build your company to sell?
So no, I wouldn't say it was built to sell, but I mean, obviously, I think at some point you either have to either there's four options. Either you hold on to it forever, it goes out of business, you go public, or you sell. Like that's really what's going to happen. And I actually had a great grandpa and a grandpa that ultimately built the same business, and it was an awesome business. They are not in tech, so they didn't, just sell, but they went to the equivalent of public, back in the day. But I kind of witnessed the pros and cons of building a business, and then, the liquidity that comes to the family, as well as what happens post. You lose that identity and you lose that business. So, when I went through my own, I definitely was very helpful to have those experiences and have the family history to know the pitfalls, as well as, where the corners are that you should be aiming at that are positive.
So, did you see somebody have a bad exit?
Oh, great financial outcome. But I think, what people don't understand is like that doesn't mean it's all positive and all rainbows. There's definitely issues that come with it. And, I can get into all the details, or I won't get into all of it, but you see isolation, you see loss of purpose, you see loss of identity, you see people, there's friction on who deserves what and who gets what. And, then from generation to generation, who inherits what, and all those things, we saw the ramifications in our family. So I didn't inherit any money. My dad didn't inherit any money. And, it's like, but his dad was uber wealthy, but we saw money really create negative effects inside of the family in many ways. And that was something that I was very cognizant of as I went through it, to be like, hold on, how do I do this and not make it a horrible experience for my family?
Yeah, what you just described, we call collateral damage, right?
Yeah.
It's like the money's here, but then it can go off like a bomb. And I've seen people, blow up the legacy that they spent so many years cultivating and creating, because they made a few poor choices because they have money. I think money is just an amplifier for who we already are. And, the more money you get, the louder the megaphone, the more public it becomes. So, let's talk about the book. What's the name of the book?
It's called Factory for Good.
Factory for Good. And I I guess people are using the liquidity from their exit to do good. Like, tell me more about the
Yeah.
name and how you got there.
Yeah, so first off, like the subtitle is navigating the pitfalls of prosperity and like how to avoid them. And what we're talking about is this: what's the playbook post exit, and how do you navigate that world to maintain a purpose, to maintain your relationships, and to create a legacy that lasts. So that's kind of how we think about it. But really, the factory analogy came from, everyone goes to their factory every day. It's like, where do you spend your time, energy, and talents every day, and what are you producing? And for anyone, it's like a good exercise to think like, hold on, what am I producing in my factory every day? What's the output? And I actually think it's a noble cause, but for many, many people, it's money, right? It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to provide shelter and food and opportunity and safety and education. And I'll say like in my 20s and 30s, that's what my career was motivated by. How do I create more money? Because I have kids and a wife, and that was great. But what happens is once you've had an exit, or once you've been able to establish some level of finances, I think that you need to retool that factory and shift it. And the output shouldn't just be money, but the focus and the output should be good. Money should now become an input with time, talents, and energy to say, okay, what can we produce? And so why I did it, why I do these speaking engagements is I'm like, hey, if you're fortunate enough to have had the luck and the skill and the wisdom and all the things to have an exit, when you're on the other side, you can create a factory for good that has a compounding effect of positivity for your family, but also many other people in your communities. And that's kind of the whole point of the book.
Wow. So I think there's always this red pill moment where like we realize that we've got something and we need to continue down that path. Do you remember what that moment was for you when you were chasing Factory for Good?
When I was chasing factory for good, like what made me kind of say, okay, I got to keep going down this.
Mhm.
I think it was like, I really had this journey. So I think there's four stages after an exit. And the first stage is honeymoon. And the honeymoon phase could last an hour, it could last a year, but like it's euphoria, it's awesome, and for me it lasted like 3 months. And then the second stage is loss of identity, loss of purpose, loss of direction, like all these things. And I kind of floundered inside of that loss for I'd say 4 to 6 months. I'd and then I moved into experimentation phase, which is stage three, and tried a bunch of stuff. And to me, it was during the experimentation phase where I realized, okay, I don't have the answers. I'm trying to figure it out. And I started interviewing other people that had had exits or had been in similar shoes. And I was like, what'd you do? Tell me what you did right, what you did wrong. And through like three or four of those conversations, I'm like, wow, two things. One, like I was starting to hear really amazing stories that were really helpful and milestones for me. And second, I was like, this isn't a conversation that people are having consistently, and it's not a common conversation. Is there a way for me to expose this conversation to those that need to hear it because they are desperate to have it and desperate to hear it? And that's what made me think like, okay, let's swallow this red pill and actually go do this thing and write a book.
Okay, and so experimentation was three. What's the fourth one? You can't leave us out on the fourth phase.
Yeah, it's reinvention. All it really means is like, okay, you found your next mountain to climb, you found your new purpose, and you know what you're going to do, whether it's a new company or a new identity. But it's honeymoon, loss, experimentation, and reinvention.
Wow. So is there a structured process for the experimentation, or are people just kind of out there, whatever they're exposed to, whoever they happen to be in a group with at the time?
Well, I just no, I think so. Like I can think, I have a few friends going through some of this right now. I think a lot of times they don't realize that that's where they're in, right? They sell their company, the proverbial, well, they're sitting on a beach, they're golfing or they're fishing or they're sitting on a beach, whatever it is they're doing. And so they're doing that, they're feeling good, and then all of a sudden you start to see them be like, oh man, like for me, I was bored and I just felt super antsy, and I went to bed at night being like, I am not earning my sleep. Like this does not feel good. And so you start to see them just kind of like meander. And for me, I like took piano lessons. I took like these stupid magic lessons. I took all these weird things and tried to do all these kind of one-off things, but they didn't have real purpose to them. So I wasn't in the shower thinking about it. I wasn't waking up and building anything. I was just doing like hobbies. And if you're honest with yourself, you start to realize that that's not that important, and your body and your soul feels that. So I think the best thing you can do in an experimentation phase is realize you're in experimentation phase and say, okay, I'm trying to find something that I love and I'm passionate about and has value in the world if I build it or if I create it. So let's go figure that out. And again, that could be another business, it could be a charity, it could be, whatever it is you want to do, but it has to have real meaning to it.
Was there a point on the journey, either in the honeymoon or maybe in the lost phase, where you took time to reflect on the journey that you've been on and maybe celebrate?
You mean post exit?
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the honeymoon phase for me. That first 3 months, I went on a trip with my wife. I went on a trip with my kids. I got to like catch up with a lot of old friends I haven't didn't have a ton of time for. That was like a moment of just finally taking a breath and being like, wow, like we did it. Like I can't believe we made it that far. So yeah, like those moments, those first 3 months after the exit, there was a lot of those where you just were able to sit back and be like, whew, we made it to the other side of the journey. So
Yeah, that's interesting. I find a lot of founders, especially tech, they don't celebrate. Like they're just kind of on to the next thing. And so like I like that you describe these four phases. I've actually one of our clients exited a couple of months ago, and well, the one last month, the wire hit and the next day they weren't happy. Like it was
can
over.
I'll tell you a story on the wire. So we're supposed to get the wire on Monday, and and some of my friends got the wire, so they're all like celebrating, but my wire didn't come. And then I'm like stressed. I'm clicking the button 1,000 times that day, and it finally the banks are closed, so it's not coming. Then on Tuesday, didn't come. And I was like, same thing. All my friends had already gotten it, and I'm just like, what? Like, I'm clicking it, and there was something wrong with the banking, and then it was like, oh, okay, so it was Wednesday. I didn't get it till Thursday. And so the funny thing is, like, there was this euphoric moment of celebration that should have existed, and it didn't. And by the time I got it, I was more mad. I was more just like done with the stress, and like, well, I'm just like, okay, I'll move on. Like it was weird. It's like it did hit, but that moment wasn't as fun as I thought, which is kind of weird, but yeah.
I don't think it's weird. I think it's normal. You expect this like big sigh of relief, and maybe it is there for some folks. But I've also seen, because usually it's more money than you've ever had in your bank account at one time. So I could see people becoming scared. They're worried about being poor again. Maybe they were okay with $10,000 being in the bank, and now if less than 100,000 or less than $1 million is in the bank, they feel like there's something wrong. Did you have any of those shifts in the way that you thought about money when that money appeared in your account?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say to people is like it it is fairly relative, meaning you just use an example, whether it's like I'm used to 10,000, or I'm used to 100,000, or I'm used to a million, whatever the number is, like there is this relative, you're still going to feel elements of stress. You're still going to be trying to do your best to make it go up. Like there's a lot of biological things within us that it's like just because someone has X money or Y money. By the way, if you hit that new goal that you have, if your goal is to get to 50,000 in your bank account and you hit it, I promise you now your new goal is going to be 100. And you're like, all right, well, now we got to get to 100. And if you get to 100, and be like, well, now my new goal is whatever. And so, there obviously is some benefits and things that I don't have to stress about now that we've gone through the exit, but it doesn't take away a lot of your relationships with money and your stresses with some of how you deal with it, how you spend it, how you save it, how you teach it to your kids. Like all those things still sit there. They're all very much right in front of you.
Was there a problem that you thought was going to go away on the backside of the exit that didn't, and you're like, oh, well, that didn't change?
Um, Yeah, a little bit of what I just said. You kind of thought like, your whole life, oh, if I could get to this number, whatever that number is, like, whew, like then I'll never even have to think about money. It'll just be like, it'll be out. And that's not true at all. I mean, like, you're still thinking about it and budgeting it and saving it, and maybe you can buy a few more things for sure, but don't kid yourself. You're still going to have a lot of the same conversations you're having with yourself or with your partner on, what should we do? Can we afford that? And again, it might shift into the thing you're buying and doing, but it's still the same conversation.
it, I moved past this and I shouldn't have. So, what are your friends saying in the 4 or 5 days when they have a wire and you don't?
I mean, the first day it was like they're all celebrating and they're like, "Oh, it'll come, it'll come." I think I remember by like day two or three, there was basically just they're just like, "Don't ask Alex." Like just like they felt bad, so they were just kind of like, But again, that and it all worked out, and obviously we were all able to celebrate at a different time, but they were just kind of like, oh shoot, hopefully, it'll come, and they just kind of stopped coming over and checking on me by Tuesday and Wednesday.
S- All right. So, you, I think you said you sold to VC, right?
We sold to a public company,
A public
Bill.com.
company.
Yeah, Bill.com.
So, did you have a broker kind of walking you guys through the deal, or how
Well,
that
you
work?
have bankers. Yeah, I mean, you have people involved, lawyers, bankers that have been through these processes representing our side, their side. And we did a lot of it on our own, but we did definitely have help.
The What are some things that went really well where like you're like, man, that was smooth, and maybe you've heard horror stories about them before?
You saying like after the exit went through or
Or
about
going
things
through
that
the
we
exit.
just
I watch so many founders get deal fatigue or feel
yeah.
like they're on this roller coaster when they're going through
So
it.
the big thing I would say going into a deal, if anyone's doing any type of deal, you have to have leverage. Like if if you're desperate to get bought and there's only one buyer, you're gonna get hosed, right? You're gonna cave on a lot of points. You're not gonna get the value out of it. But if you have leverage, which means you know what you're worth and you don't need to sell and there's more than one buyer, like all those things, then you can hold your ground on the valuation, on sticking points, on how much you get up front, what the legal says on the back end and all that.
Hey guys, as you might know, a very small percentage of the people who actually listen to this podcast are subscribers. So do us a favor, subscribe. In fact, we did some analytics and we found out that only 25% of the people who listen are subscribers. And our goal is to get that to about 75% over the next 3 months. So do us a favor, hit the subscribe button so you get notified when our new episodes come. We plan to bring immense value to you guys going forward as we continue to improve the content that we create at Dreamcatcher. Your dreams should be real. Let's get back to the show.
The biggest thing that went well for us is I felt like we had leverage in the sense of we knew our business was good. We knew who we were and we were willing to walk away. And I think when you're willing to do that, it allowed us to negotiate on some points that, look in retrospect were like significant. So
Did you have to, or are you consulting back to the company that acquired you guys?
So I was the only one that did not stay on. Everyone else at the company stayed on for 1 to 3 years or something to that effect. But I left the next day. So it was abrupt.
That's I call that a head-on car accident. You go from
It was a collision. Yeah. It was like Tuesday, go to work. Wednesday, I'm out. See ya.
how did you not break all your bones?
Um, like I said, the first I had been running at kind of a breakneck speed, so to speak, that entrepreneurial, all things go for like a decade at the time. So it felt like I had been in a car accident and I needed to just like go rest for a little bit. So the first month or so, actually, I felt good. It was like, oh my gosh, I can breathe. I can get some more sleep. I can relax. I can see some people. Where the car accident hit me was like 2 or 3 months later when it wasn't summer and it wasn't fun and all the trips were gone. Your kids are at school, your friends are at work. That's when the like boom, kind of came over me and I'm like, oh my gosh, my life's different and I got to figure this out because I don't exactly love where I'm at.
So when we're doing workshops, we have people put the 5 people they spend the most time with on a chart, and then we ask them how many of those aren't associated with the business, because the thought is once you transition out the business, you won't spend a lot of time talking to those folks because basically they're working and you're not. Of your 5 people that you spent the most time with, how many of them were associated with the business?
When I was doing the business?
Yep. Well, like post exit. So like, hey, I talk to these 5 people
Okay.
every day, and now I'm out.
Post exit, yeah, I mean it would be none of them. It's my wife, it's my oldest brother, it's someone my new business I do, which is venture capital, my best friend, and probably my other friend, and it's like only one of them is in my current business. The others are not, but I'm with those people more than anyone else. But if you'd asked me when I was in the middle of building Divvy, then yeah, I mean, it would have been the 5 executives on the exec team and my wife. Like that would have been the answer.
Yeah. I think people don't expect that. And so when you were talking about, hey, it hit me at that point. So one thing's resting. It's like, oh yeah, man, the world slows down. And now it's like, hey, yeah, I'm ready to re-engage and I've recuperated. And it's like, yeah, hey, buddy, while you were over there taking a nap, we were doing work.
Yeah, for sure. And that's some of the things I try to tell people is so first off, when you're doing the business, sometimes like you forget, you just ask the question, who do you spend the most time with? You would think, oh, my wife, and it's like it's not. It's actually like our head of revenue and our head of product because I'm with them for 10 hours a day, if not more. I mean, if not 12. So, my wife, it was like maybe three just because of the way things work. So you start to realize like if you're in that type of business, your business colleagues, you're around them all the time. And then the car crashes, yeah, once it's over, I'm still good friends with those people. We still talk, but it's no longer 10 hours a day with them. Now it's like your whole social circle has changed because you're no longer living in that house called work and you're in this other, other environment and that's the type of stuff. I frankly think I think you said it earlier, that's the type of stuff that can cause a lot of the friction or the bad choices is you change your entire social group and setting and boom. And if we said, okay, who are those 5? And if those 5 have some like we'll call them hanger-oners or people that aren't contributing or building you up or they're just taking from you, um, you know, an entourage, so to speak, whatever it is, like that's totally that. Think about the outcome for you personally and switching your social circles there and how damaging that can be without you knowing it.
The um the next thing that I'd like to explore a little bit, you talk about the loss phase. Uh, how did you get out of it? Because most people just kind of skip over that step. They're like, "Oh yeah, I sold the thing, and now I'm magically running a VC company," for example.
I felt like I needed to do something, have purpose, build a factory, as I mentioned earlier. So what I realized is like I didn't want to work the same hours I was working when I was doing Divvy full time in the tech, but I really wanted to help out the entrepreneurs in my area and give them the same advice or similar advice and experiences that I got. And so I was like, all right, I was taking those meetings for free, lunches, one-offs, just helping these entrepreneurs. And so when I got approached by my now partner, McKay, to say, hey, I wanted to do venture capital, it was like, oh, I can go build something. I can bring money into our market, but I also can still do what I want to do, which is talk to entrepreneurs. And to me, it felt like the right fit, the right amount of time and energy. And also, I felt like my puzzle piece of what I could bring to the table was a good fit for what that would take. And so that's why I jumped into it.
So it sounds like you were pulled out of it by your new business partner.
Yeah, I was definitely trying a bunch of random stuff, and I didn't get fully pulled out of it until my now business partner was like, "Hey, let's go do this," and it was like that was the direction I needed.
For people who might be listening today and they're in the lost space, what would you tell them? Like, is there some light for them that you might be
Oh
able to
yeah,
share?
sure. I would say you gotta go figure out, think about what's your factory or what's your mountain. What mountain are you climbing? Like, what is your direction? What are you trying to achieve? What is your factory producing? Pick your analogy, but you've got to think through it. And if it's like, oh, well, I have money and I can just do stuff, you're gonna be meandering around, not with direction. You got to figure out what you want to be, what value are you going to bring the world, and go do that. And again, that doesn't mean you have to work 80 hours a week or go do another business, but you've got to figure out, are you going to coach the local high school sports team? Are you going to do a charity? Are you going to, spend time fostering kids, or are you going to go build another business? I don't care, but you have to have something bigger than yourself that you can go help build. And as you establish value in the world, you will feel more value within yourself.
It's interesting. So I assume that some of your companies are going to exit out of what you guys are doing with the VC. Are you going to have the founders of those companies proactively decouple their identity from the business, or are you going to let them work on that on the backside of the exit if you're a part of that post-exit process?
That is a good question. Um, I'm going to answer it this way. I think that if you are running a startup, if you're actually running a real startup, a real business, it's almost impossible to not have it be your identity until it gets big. Meaning you should be so invested into this company is your identity. I think you're lying to yourself if you think you can just totally decouple it. It takes everything in you to get something off the ground and into a good space. So no, go do that. But we can figure out how to detach it as you get bigger or how to handle it as you exit. And I think you have to just deal with it after or later. But at the beginning, if I met a founder right now that wasn't just, I could feel like the energy dripping off their bones of like what this business is, I wouldn't invest because I'm like, they're not going to have what it takes to get through the bad stuff.
Okay. I think you answered another question I had through that answer because I was wondering, since you saw all the things that happened, did you decouple before you exited? But you were in it as
No.
CEO
I wasn't
till day
CEO.
zero.
My partner was CEO, but um, I was, we're all doing a ton of stuff. You're fully invested, and I had to figure out how to divest myself from the Divvy brand, just from just that being like the Divvy co-founder and doing different stuff after. So it was definitely I figured that out after.
I don't know if it's a fair question, but I'll ask anyway. Do you have any guidance for the people out there who might be trying to figure out how to decouple the identity? I liken it to the
Yeah.
35-year-old who's still wearing his high school Letterman jacket.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Whether you're in the business or out of the business, I would give you the advice of like, for me, I have a wife and I have four children. That is infinitely more important than whatever happens on this business set, right? So like you have to understand who you are and what is your real identity. And like if you looked at like my life on one side, I'd say, well, I'm a man of faith. I'm a man, I have a wife, I have kids, and like this is my extended family, my friends. That's who I am. This over here, if you looked at my LinkedIn page, it's like, well, 2 years, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's like your career is always changing and then brands are changing. Like this is who you are, and you should know that. And you should know like there's a difference between the founder and who you are as a person. Um, and so have a base for where you stand and who you are. But in those years that you're building your company, it's gonna feel pretty intertwined for a lot of it.
Well, the way I would boil down what you just said is there's who you are and there's what you do. And the what you do is the business building, it's the company stuff, and the R is kind of your roles outside of that. And maybe it's your role inside of that too. Um,
I
it,
I really
it
liked what you said real quick about the Letterman's jacket because like a 35-year-old wearing a Letterman's jacket is ridiculous. And I have felt that post exit of like, oh man, I have to do something else. I can't just have that be my one hit. Like I'm too young. And so there's been actually more stress than you would think about I can't just keep dining on this dish of from 5 years ago or wearing the Letterman's jacket from 5 years ago. And in 10 years, I have to do something else that has some value. And so
mm.
it's this weird notion of, like I'm happy to talk about my Divvy experience. I'm proud of what we did, but you're also trying to move on and create new identities and new successes and stuff. So you're not just wearing your Letterman's jacket 10 years down the road.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Um, so I just want to circle back. So the book is Factory for Good. Um, my takeaway is you built it because um, money shouldn't be the only output. We should create an output of improving the human experience in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. You're not telling people how they should improve the experience, just that they should, and it's for them to figure out because that's their post-exit purpose.
Yeah, I think that that's really good analogy. The only other thing I would add to that is it's also a playbook on how to navigate the emotional obstacles that come with prosperity, the things that come to you post exit, and how to kind of navigate that landscape. We try to talk about that and do a lot of interviews and stories and try to give some ways to navigate that.
Okay. So, and that's where I was trying to get to. So, I think most people don't understand like that there's a relationship with money. And it sounds like the book really helps people um, understand what that is from an outside perspective. I think it's really hard to read the label on the jar if you're in the jar. And so
Yep.
I think the book is pulling them out of that so that they can see what's going on. You mentioned some stories. Like, is there a favorite story or a favorite lesson surrounding the money on the backside that we could impart on the listeners so that they feel compelled to go grab the book and hear and learn more?
Yeah, I'll give you one that I just so um I'll tell this one because it's relevant for me. The biggest thing that mattered post exit to my wife was like, how do we not let this money ruin our children? Right? Like that you would turn the American dream into the American nightmare if our kids just became like, drug addicts and losers and, like troublemakers because the money we enabled them with money to be spoiled, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So that was her big concern.
Mhm.
So through this discussion was like, okay, well, how do you give your kid opportunity, right? Money to school and things like that, but also not spoil them or entitle them. So this is the balance that we were weighing. How do you navigate that? And for us, we created this thing called the Bank of Mom and Dad, which is a discussion of, okay, well, I have a 14-year-old and I'll give you, do you have any kids, by the way?
I got a 14-year-old too,
Oh,
so
let's go. Okay, I'm gonna ask you. Okay, your 14-year-old right now wants to go to the movie with their friends on the weekend with boy or girl.
girl,
Okay, same here. Your daughter, 14, wants to go to the movie with her friends on the weekend. Do you pay for 0%, 50%, or 100% of that movie?
today I pay for all of it.
Okay, would your wife agree with that?
Yes.
And your daughter would obviously agree with it. Okay. So let's say when they turn 16, and I said to all of you independently in three different rooms, who's going to pay for the car or the transportation? Is it 0%, 50%, or 100%?
She's wired that she wants to pay for everything. She doesn't actually want the help. She just doesn't have a mechanism right now to earn.
Yeah.
So, when I think about Kaya, she's got all 97% and above in all her classes. For me, her job at school right now. Um,
Yeah. So that's
for
good.
yeah,
But even in that, like with our daughter, we say, okay, we actually make her pay for 50% of all the extra stuff she wants to do. And we say, okay, if you get an A, I give her, it's like $15 or $20 at the end of the school year. It's not a lot, but she has a job. She goes across the street, she works, like she babysits for us. We pay her, like we give her opportunities to make money. But when she wants to buy that lipstick that we don't want to buy, we're like, yeah, it's 50%. That's the bank of mom and dad. This is how this is going to work. You have to pay for some, we have to pay for some. And then when she's 16, it's a different agreement. And then when she's 18 and she's going to leave her house, it's a different agreement. And the whole point is there's not a right answer of my way or your way being right, but the husband and wife, or like the partners and the kids, they all have to be aligned on who's paying for what, who's responsible for what, and then we have to march our kids into a place of independence where they don't need us anymore. And the story I'll tell you, and this is the story I'll tell you. And I'm not going to tell this story to scare you, but I'm just going to give you the story because this is actually how it started. One of the interviews, basically this happened. A guy's like, "Look, I helped my daughter. Her job was school. I paid for her everything." It's like, "Okay." And he's like, "I did it through junior high and I did it through high school, and then she went to college. Same. I helped her as she like did school. I helped her with her books and her food and her rent and all this stuff." And then she got out of college and it was just like, oh, I still need help. Like she never learned independence. So she's like, she started, she got married, but then she got divorced. She came and lived at home. And dad was always bailing her out. Finally, at 30 years old, he's like, look, yeah, I gotta stop paying for this stuff. So he cut her off. And she didn't just say, "Oh, thank you for the 30 years of helping me and pay for everything." She freaks out. She won't talk to him. They have an estranged relationship. She goes on social media. She's trying to say how bad her dad is, all this stuff. And when he's telling me this in tears, it's because he realized when she was in high school, he just paid for everything. He didn't teach her how to be on her own. And so he's like, I was a horrible bank. I just handed out money. So then my customer, my kid, just kept taking the money because that's what we would all do if a bank was handing out money.
yeah.
So that type of thing is like what we cover in the book to help people come up with different frameworks and thought processes and to have those discussions so that kids can become independent and not relying on their parents if the parents are in a position of prosperity.
I love this. I've I've rolled this around because I've seen the other end of that, right? Where the kid gets a $500 car because that's how much the kid can afford, or um, these splits, or parents don't help with college at all, or insert the thing. And I've seen just about every way backfire, right? Like there's exception to the rule. And so I think what you guys have put together is going to help expand people's consciousness. I think they're going to be exposed to new ways to consider it because unfortunately, most of us just repeat what was done to us,
Yeah.
right? If our parents said, "Oh, well, we're not putting in," and then we carry that down to our kids. Go ahead.
Yeah, but think about that. Like my wife grew up in a lower income home, so she worked like from 14 on because that's how she got anything. But our kids are not growing up in that environment. So she actually like doesn't know she does like when life tells you no, it's like the greatest lesson because you then have to go figure it out, right? But when mommy and daddy can swipe a credit card easily and it's not actually a problem, then it creates this like, well, hold on, the thing that made me was life telling me no, but life can tell me yes now. So that's the thing that flips when like you were raised in an environment that you didn't have a lot and now you have more. How do you navigate teaching your kids? Well, hold on, they can't have everything in the world because that's what made you you. So it's never perfect. There's not like one way to do it, but it's the paradox of prosperity that you see throughout literally eons of time. And there's a reason that they say 90% of wealth is gone by the third generation. And we can get into that as this whole other discussion, but there's a reason that even if you have $1 billion, it will be gone in 2 or 3 generations. And you're like, how is that so? And it's a lot of this type of stuff.
Wow. Alex, I appreciate there being a factory for good. In our model, we call it proceeds invested for lasting legacy. or pill, but like this concept is one that I think adds tremendous value. And I think it gets you off the hedonic treadmill of just finding more. I watch so many people, hey, I got the Rolex, now I need the AP. I got the AP, now I need the Patek, or, I got the Corvette, now I need the Ferrari. I got the Ferrari, now I need the Lamborghini. I got the Lamborghini, now I need the Pagani or the Bugatti. I just watch so many people get trapped in that and never realizing that the next one, the bigger one, the faster one, the shinier one isn't actually going to fix anything, and it's not ever going to lead to fulfillment.
Correct. Yep, I agree.
So, I mean, one last question, man. If they want to get the book or they want to find out more about you, what's the best thing for them to do?
Go to factoryforgood.com. It's free, it's there. We have a bunch of engagements like the Bank of Mom and Dad and some others that you'll find really interesting. You can buy the book off a link on Amazon, but we'd love to just have you come interact, come read the content, and hopefully build your own factory for good.
Your message is one that just truly resonates with me, and it puts you in that category of a true dream catcher because you're not only did what you wanted to do, but you're helping other people find their way to what true success is, which we call significance, right? The ability to go out there and impact the world in a positive way and make it better for those who come behind us. I spend a lot of time thinking about the type of world I want my grandchildren to grow up in, and I'm trying to help create that while looking at my daughters. And it sounds like you're on that same mission. So man, I just want to tell you I'm grateful for you and really appreciate you spending time with me on the show today.
Hey, appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
To the listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll catch you on the next episode.